Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones that you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Now, many podcasts put their promotion and cup rattling halfway through or towards the end. But because I'm hoping that you're asleep long before we get there, I need to put this stuff up front. The show is brought to you by the supporters on Patreon. I'm hearing from people all the time how valuable they find the show, and those supporters who have the means to help fund the show, to keep it going and to help me reach new audiences are very much appreciated. So if you would like to, and you have the means, please take a look at patreon.com/sleepytimetales at the link in the show notes or from the website to see what you can get as a supporter. There are real rewards from available from as little as $2 a month, and that's over and above the knowledge that you are helping thousands of fellow insomniacs to get a good night's sleep. Other methods of support listed in the show notes if monthly contributions aren't your thing. There, other than the Patreon, there's the tip jar, there's the merchandise store. I've got a very cool new mug design, which I'm quite proud of. Maybe take a look at that. Something for your herbal tea to drink before you go to bed at night. I'm a robust tea drinker myself, being a South African. That's a local thing here. And another way you can also help the show is simply to spread the word. If there is someone in your life who you think will benefit from listening to Sleepy Time Tales, just let them know. And if you recommend the show on social media, please make sure to tag me in so that I can see and I can thank you. That's at Sleepy Time Tales on Instagram or Twitter. I don't really push reviews and stuff for various reasons, but it is really nice when they come. And I got one a few weeks ago. I keep forgetting to make a note of it to put it up, from Esther Dotter, 5-star review. I think Esther Dotter has given me a review before, and this one is quite fun. She says, "Don't expect fascinating stories, that's not the point. They are just interestingly enough that if you don't fall asleep, you have a nice read. For me and for many listeners, it works. I've tried several sleep podcasts, and this is the best." Now that is very high praise, and I'm glad that Esther Dotter enjoys it so much. It looks also a lot like a response to a previous review, a 1-star one that complained about the long intro. So clearly some people just don't get it, but I can promise you, the people who are fans of the show and who enjoy the long intro, it is not going anywhere, although I do think I do need to freshen it up, so I need to work over it for the next few weeks. I realize insomnia sometimes is either a cause or a result of sometimes underlying issues. For me, I've got a bit of an anxiety problem, and that's one of the things that keeps me awake. So if you suffer with stress or anxiety or anything else, try out BetterHelp. It's a secure online therapy from licensed professionals. I'm not going to go into the whole story at the moment. If you're interested, visit trybetterhelp.com/sleepytime. That's trybetterhelp.com/sleepytime. Or also have a look at the website to learn a bit more. I explain a little bit more about the service there. And you, as a Sleepy Time Tale listener, you get 10% off your first month when you sign up. Last but not least, of course, I've got to give props to the music, which is a very important part of the identity of this show. The song is Un Désert by Kumiko. Their music is available on the Free Music Archive, and I've linked their website in the show notes, as they've got some very cool stuff that they release under various names that I recommend you check out. Thank you very much for taking the time, and back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? It's a bit of a strange idea, isn't it? a podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to. But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast that is intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find that you lie awake at night with your mind spinning and your emotions in turmoil with anxieties and stresses of your 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself just not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. I'm someone who has struggled to sleep ever since I was a baby. My parents had sleepless nights with me for years, and even once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, I always struggled to sleep. I struggled basically my entire life, and I still do sometimes. But I discovered quite late in life the tendency for voices, particularly droning male voices, to act almost like a tranquilizer for me. I used to lie in bed at nights expecting to lie awake most of the night and put podcasts on, and I would suddenly find myself waking up having missed everything I was trying to listen to. I started listening to podcasts specifically to help me sleep, and then one day I discovered that there were some out there actually for the specific purpose. People that were telling tales to the sleepless insomniacs and actually hoping that they would fall asleep while they were talking. I tried out one or two and I recommended them to other people, and for various reasons, people I recommended them to didn't quite enjoy them. And I thought to myself, I've got this boring, droning male voice, so let me give it a bash. Let me see if I can reach others who so far haven't been able to be helped. And so I started up Old Sleepy Time Tales. Now, every episode starts with this long intro. It's one of those things I've mentioned a few times, that if I get a complaint about the show, this intro is what people don't like because it goes on too long and they don't get to the story yet. But they kind of missed the point. People who've been listening to the show for a while have a way that they engage with it, and it's also important to have this long intro because I need to explain to new listeners what it's for and how I believe it's helpful to engage with it and make a case for it. I mean, it is a bit of a strange thing, so I think I need to explain it to you. For people who've been listening to the show a while, the intro itself is kind of part of the process. I go through pretty much the same thing every week. I re-record it every time, and I say mostly the same things except when I get confused and lose track of where I am. Because I want to engage authentically and I want to go more or less through this stuff, but I don't want to be too repetitive and too boring by just copying and pasting it every week. Because what we're trying to do here is, you and I, as a listener and a storyteller, we're trying to build a space here. A place where you can relax and settle down and make yourself comfortable. Now, as far as I know, there's a couple of different ways to engage with the show. For me, when I listen to a podcast at night, I actually need to listen to something. I need a story or a series of events that, I suppose that is a story, that I can concentrate on to distract myself so that I don't resist sleep when it tries to come for me. For other people, maybe it's something a little bit different. Maybe for them or maybe for you, it's just background noise. Some people like white noise or the sound of the ocean or the sound of wind in the trees. Or maybe some people just need a boring guy with a droning voice to go on and on and on and on. Tonight's story is a continuation of an older story that I started. It's called Under Two Flags. It's the story of a popular young guardsman who has money and gambling problems and the trouble that he gets into. Quite a charming little tale of sorts, I guess, although so far hasn't gotten too exciting, which is obviously a good thing. So, whatever you do, whatever the story that I'm telling you, just keep a light mental grip on this tale. Just hold on to the story, hold on to the thread with your mind, and allow the need to sleep for sleep to come for you. Now, obviously, I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but it's important that you don't feel pressurized. If this is your first night listening to the show, it actually probably won't work for you. I usually say it may not work, but the fact is it probably won't. It'll probably take a couple of nights. I recommend giving it 3 or 4 to see if it just works for you. And I'd make that same recommendation for anything that you're trying to do, because this is a bit of a strange idea. You're listening to some strange guy going on, telling a story. You may not even know what the story is and why you're listening to it. And I may have a bit of a strange accent. It's a bit of a strange thing. So maybe I think people generally will need a little bit of time to sort of get over the hesitance that I think is inevitable and probably a little bit healthy. It's also possible that one episode just isn't long enough. So queue up a couple of episodes and let them go. What I do with the podcast that I listen to is I have a whole bunch downloaded, and then I start with the latest episode, and then I just let them run all night. I've actually started falling asleep a lot better than I used to, but now I wake up at 3 a.m. or thereabouts at night. And my podcast is still going. And I just pop my earbuds back in and I go back to sleep. Not a problem. Sometimes even I wake up sometimes 30 minutes or 60 minutes before my alarm, and I do the exact same thing. Pop my earbuds in and go back to sleep. And it may sound a strange thing to say, like, what is the point of going back to bed or going back to sleep if you've got 30 minutes or 60 minutes only? But I've got to tell you now that sometimes that 30 minutes is absolutely the best part of my night. Just allowing deep relaxation right before the alarm goes is just satisfying on such a profound level. I've even had people send me messages to thank me for suggesting this to them because they can't believe how effective it is. So really, give it a try. But whether it's trying to go to bed or waking up at night or beating the alarm, the main thing is that you need to relax. You lie in the dark, and while you do that, I'll tell you a tale. So relax, dear listener, my nighttime friend who has elected to lie in the dark, listening to my voice. You will always be safe with me. I'm here to help you to relax, to do my small part to help you in a big way. People don't sleep very well these days, and it makes their lives harder, so I'm here to help you to face tomorrow and the day after well rested and better able to cope and process. I believe very strongly in the benefits of kindness. I want to be kind to you. I want to share kindness with you. And I need you to be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up or rebuke yourself over not sleeping. Don't get tense if you just can't get yourself over the edge of sleep, even with me here in your ears trying to help. Frustration is one of the great enemies of a good night's sleep. And the intention with this podcast is to short-circuit that frustration, to distract the feeling that we get when we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and drift into the dark. So take a breath. Forgive the fact that you can't sleep and let my voice wash over you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep into a better life starting tomorrow. And if you can't let go, forgive yourself and try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep is something like an enemy. But it is not your enemy. It's a natural process that we've been pulled away from by stress and life, and progress shining bright lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Tonight we return to Under Two Flags by Ouida. Chapter 2. The Loose Box and the Tabagie. How long before the French can come up? Asked Wellington, hearing of the pursuit that was thundering close on his rear in the most critical hours of the short, sultry Spanish night. Half an hour at least was the answer. Very well then, I will turn in and get some sleep, said the commander-in-chief, rolling himself in a cloak and lying down in a ditch to rest as soundly for the single half hour as any tired drummer boy. Serenely as Wellington, another hero slept profoundly, on the eve of a great event, of a great contest to be met when the day should break, of a critical victory depending on him alone to save the guards of England from defeat and shame. Their honour and their hopes rested on his solitary head. By him they would be lost or saved, but unharassed by the magnitude of the stake at issue, unhaunted by the past, unfretted by the future, he slumbered, the slumber of the just. Not Sir Tristram, Sir Calidore, Sir Launcelot, no, nor Arthur himself was ever truer knight, was ever gentler, braver, bolder, more staunch of heart, more loyal of soul, than he to whom the glory of the brigades was trusted now. Never was their spirit more dauntless and fiery in the field, never temper kindlier and more generous with friends and foes. Miles of the ridge and furrow stuffed fences of terrible blackthorn, double posts and rails, yawners and croppers both, tough as shire and stewards could make them, awaited him on the morrow. On his beautiful lean head, capfuls of money were piled by the service and the talent, and in his stride all of the fame of the household would be centred on the morrow. But he took his rest like the cracker he was, standing as though he were on guard and steady as a rock, a hero every inch of him. For he was Forest King, the great steeplechaser on whom the guards had laid all their money for the grand military, the soldier's blue ribbon. His quarters were a loose box, his camp bed a litter of fresh straw shaken down, his clothing a very handsome rug, hood and quarter-piece buckled on and marked B.C. Above the manger and the door was lettered his own name in gold, Forest King, and in the panels of the latter were miniatures of his sire and of his dam, Lord of the Isles, one of the greatest hunters that the cross counties ever sent across them, and Bayadere, a wild pigeon-blue mare of Circassia. How, furthermore, he stretched up his long line of ancestry by the sovereign, out of Queen of Roses, by Belted Earl, out of Fallen Star, by Marmion, out of Court Coquette, and straight up to the white cockade blood, etc., etc., etc. Is it not written in the mighty and immortal chronicle, previous as the Quran, patrician as the peerage, known and loved to mortals as the stud book? Not an immensely large or unusually powerful horse, but with race in every line of him. Steel grey in colour, darkening well at all points, shining and soft as satin, with the firm muscles quivering beneath at the first touch of excitement to the high metal and finely strung organization. The head small, lean, racer-like, blood all over, and with the delicate taper ears almost transparent in full light. Well ribbed up, fine shoulders, admirable girth and loins, legs clean, slender, firm, promising splendid knee action. 16 hands high and up to 13 stone. clever enough for anything, trained to close in open country. A perfect brook jumper, a clipper at fencing, taking a great deal of riding, as anyone could tell by the set-on of his neck, but docile as a child to a well-known hand. Such was Forest King, with his English and Eastern strains, winner at Chertsey, Croydon, the National, the Granbury, the Belvoir Castle, the Curragh, and all the gentlemen, rider, steeplechasers, and military sweepstakes in the kingdom, and entered now with tremendous bets on him for the gilt face. It was a crisp, cold night outside, starry, wintry, but open weather and clear. The ground would be just right on the morrow, neither hard as the slate of a billiard table, nor wet as the slush of a quagmire. Forest King slept steadily on in his warm and spacious box, dreaming doubtless of days of victory, cub hunting in the reedy October woods and pastures of the ringing notes of the horn, and the sweet music of the pack and the glorious quick burst-up wind, breasting the icy cold water and showing the way over fence and bullfinch. Dozing and dreaming pleasantly, but alert for all that, for he awoke suddenly, shook himself, had a hilarious roll in the straw, and stood at attention. Awake only could you tell the generous and gallant promise of this perfect temper, for there are no eyes that speak more truly, none on earth that are so beautiful as the eyes of a horse. Forest King's were dark as a gazelle's, as soft as a woman's, brilliant as stars, a little dreamy and mournful, and as infinitely caressing when he looked at what he loved, as they could blaze full of light and fire when danger was near and rivalry against him. How loyally such eyes have looked at me over the paddock fence, as a wild, happy gallop was suddenly broken for a gentle head to be softly pushed against my hand with the gentlest of welcomes. They sadly put to shame the million human eyes that so fast learn the lie of the world and utter it as falsely as the lips. The steeplechaser stood alert, every fibre of his body strung to pleasurable excitation. The door opened, a hand held him some sugar, and the voice he loved best said fondly, "All right, old boy?" Forest King devoured the beloved dainty with true equine unction, rubbed his forehead against his master's shoulder, and pursed his nose into the nearest pocket in search of more of his sweetmeat. "You'd eat a sugar loaf, you dear old rascal. Put the gas up, George," said his owner, while he turned up the body clothing to feel the firm, cool skin, loosened one of the bandages, passed his hand from thigh to fetlock, and glanced around the box to be sure the horse had been well suppered and littered down. "Think we shall win, Rake?" Rake, with a stable lantern in his hand and a forage cap on one side of his head, standing a little in advance of a group of grooms and helpers, took a straw out of his mouth and smiled a smile of sublime scorn and security. "Win, sir? I should be glad to know as when that way a king ever beats yet, or you either, sir, for that matter." Bertie Cecil laughed a little languidly. "Well, we take a good deal of beating, I think, and there are not very many who can give it to us, are there, old fellow?" he said to the horse as he passed his palm over the withers. "But there are some crushes in the lot tomorrow, and you'll have to do all you know." Forest King caught the manger with his teeth, and kicked in a bit of play and ate more sugar, with much licking of his lips to express the nonchalance with which he viewed his share in the contest, and his tranquil certainty of being first past the flags. His master looked at him once more and sauntered out of the box. "He's in first-rate form, Rake, and tight as a trivet." "Course he is, sir. Nobody ever laid a leg over such cattle as all that white cockade blood, and he's the very best of the strain," said Rake as he held up the lantern across the stable yard that looked doubly dark in the February night after the bright gas glare of the box. So he need be, thought Cecil, as a bull terrier. 3 or 4 Gordon setters, an Alpine Mastiff, and 2 wiry Skies dashed at the chains, giving tongue in frantic delight at the sound of his step, while the hounds echoed the welcome from their more distant kennels, and he went slowly across the great stone yard with the end of a huge cheroot glimmering through the gloom. So he need be to pull me through. The ducal in the October let me in for it enough. I was never closer in my life. The deuce, if I don't do the distance tomorrow, I shan't have many sovereigns enough to play pound points at night. I don't know what a man's to do. If he's put it into his life, he must get to the pace of it. Why did Royal send me to the Guards if he meant to keep the screw on this way? He'd better have drafted me into a marching regiment at once if he wanted me to live upon nothing. Nothing meant anything under £60,000 a year with Cecil, as the minimum of monetary necessities in this world, and a look of genuine annoyance and trouble, most unusual there, was on his face. The picture of carelessness and gentle indifference habitually, though shadowed now as he crossed the courtyard after his after-midnight visit to steeplechaser. He had backed Forest King heavily and stood to win or lose a cracker on his own riding on the morrow. And though he had found sufficient to bring him to the Shires, he barely enough lying on his dressing table, up in the bachelor suite within, to pay his groom's book, or a notion where to get more if the king should find his match over the ridge and forrer in the morning. It was not pleasant. A cynical, savage, world-disgusted Timon derives on the whole a good amount of satisfaction from his breakdown in the fine philippics against his contemporaries that is certain to afford, and the magnificent grievances with which it furnishes him. But when life is very pleasant to a man, and the world very fond of him, when existence is perfectly smooth, bar that single pressure of money, and is an incessantly changing kaleidoscope of London seasons, Paris winters, ducal houses in the hunting months, dinners at the Pall Mall clubs, dinners at the Star and Garter, dinners irreproachable everywhere, cottage for Ascot week, yachting with the RVY club, Derby handicaps at Hornsey, pretty chorus singers set up in bijou villas, dashing rosières taken over to Baden, warm corners in Belvoir, Savernake and Longhy bateaux, and the rest of the general program with no drawback to it, except the duties at the palace, the heat to review or the extravagance of a pampered Leon, then to be pulled up in that easy, swinging gallop for sheer want of a golden shoe, as one may say, is abominably bitter and requires far more philosophy to endure than Timon could ever manage to master. It is a bore, an unmitigated bore, a harsh, hateful, unrelieved martyrdom that the world does not see, and that the world would not pity if it did. Never mind, things will come right. Forest King never failed me yet. He is as full of running as a Derby winner, and he'll go over the yawners like a bird, thought Cecil, who never confronted his troubles with more than 60 seconds' thought, and who was of that light, impassible, half-levity, half-languor of temperament that both throws off worries easily and shirks it persistently. Sufficient for the day, etc., was the essence of his creed, and if he had enough to lay a fiver at night on the rubber, he was quite able to forget for the time that he wanted 500 for settling day in the morning, and had not an idea how to get it. There was not a trace of anxiety on him when he opened a low arched door, passed down a corridor, and entered the warm, full light of that chamber of liberty, that sanctuary of the persecuted, that temple of refuge, thrice blessed in all its forms throughout the land, that consecrated Mecca of every true believer in the divinity of the meerschaum, the paradise of the nargil, the smoking room. A spacious, easy chamber too, lined with the ladiest of divans, seen just now through a fog of smoke and tenanted by nearly a score of men in every imaginable loose velvet costume, and with faces well known in the park at 6 o'clock in May, and on the heath in October, in Paris in January, and on the Solent in August, in Pratt's of a summer night and on the moors of an autumn evening, as though they were features that came round as regularly as the July or the Waterloo Cup. Some were puffing away in calm relative comfort, in silence that they would not have broken for any earthly consideration. Others were talking hard and fast, and though the air heavily weighted with the varieties of tobacco, from tiny cigarettes to giant cheroots, from rough balls full of Cavendish to sybaritic rosewater hookers. A babel of sentences rose together. Gave him too much riding, the idiot. Take the field bar none. Nothing so good as the mare as a little nighter and antimony and a mash. Not at all. The Regent and Ray cross in the old strain always was black tan with a white frill. The Earl's as good a fellow as Lady Flora, always gave you a mount. Nothing like a Kate Terry, though, on a bright day for salmon. Faster thing I never knew, found at 20 minutes past 11 and killed just beyond Lungdown Water at 10 to 12. All these various phrases were rushing in among each other and tossed across the eddies of smoke, and the conflicting tongues loosened in the tabaji and made eloquent, though slightly inarticulate by pipe stems. While a tall, fair man with the limbs of Hercules, the chest of a prize fighter, and the face of a Raphael angel, known in the household as Seraph, was in the full blood of a story of whist, played under difficulties in the Doncaster Express. I wanted a monkey. I wanted monkeys awfully, he was stating as Forest King's owner came into the smoking room. Did you, Seraph? The zoo or the clubs could supply you with apes fully developed to any amount, said Bertie as he threw himself down. You be hanged, laughed the Seraph, known to the rest of the world as the Marquis of Rockingham, son of the Duke of Lyonesse. I wished monkeys, but the others wished ponies and hundreds, so I gave in. Vanderburgh and I won 2 rubbers, and we'd just begun the third when the train stopped with a crash. None of us dropped the cards, though, but the tricks and scores all went down with the shaking. Can't play in that row, said Charlie, for the women were shrieking like mad, and the engine was roaring like my ma'am Philippa. I'm afraid she'll never be cured, poor thing. So I put my head out and asked what's up. We'd run into a cattle train. Anybody hurt? No, nobody hurt, but we were to get out. I'll be shot if I get out, I told them, till I've finished the rubber. But you must get out, said the guard. Carriages must be moved. Nobody says must to him, said Van. He drank more Pearl Doreen than was good for him in Doncaster. Don't you know the Seraph? Man stared. Yes, sir. Know the Seraph? Sir, leastways did, sir, for he died. See him once up in Molesley Mill, sir. His 1-2 was amazing. Water soon threw up the sponge. We were all dying with laughter, and I tossed him a tenner. There, my good fellow, said I. Shunt the carriage and let us finish the game. If another train comes up, give it Lord Rockingham's compliments and say he'll thank it to stop because collisions shake his trumps together. Man thought us mad. Took tenner, though. Shunted us to one side out of the noise, and we played 2 rubbers more before they'd repaired the damage and sent us on to town. And the Seraph took a long-drawn whiff from his silver meerschaum, and then a deep draught of soda and brandy to refresh himself after the narrative. Biggest, best-tempered, and wildest of men in or out of the service, despite his angelic character of his fair-haired head, and blue eyes that looked as clear and innocent as those of a 6-year-old child. Not the first time by a good many that you've shunted off the straight, Seraph, laughed Cecil, substituting an amber mouthpiece for his half-finished cheroot. I've been saving a good night look at the king. He'll stay. Course he will, chorused half a dozen voices. With all our pots on him, added Seraph. He's too much of a gentleman to put us all up a tree. He knows he carries the honour of the household. There are some good mounts, there's no denying that, said Chesterfield of the Blues, who was called Tom for no other reason than it was entirely unlike his real name of Adolphus, where he was curled up almost invisible except for the movement of the jasmine stick of his chibuke. That brute Daystar is a splendid fencer, and for a brook jumper it would be heard to best wild geranium through her shoulders and not quite what they ought to be. Montacute, too, can ride a good thing, and he's got one in pas de charge. I'm not much afraid of Monty. He makes too wild a burst first. He never saves on atom, yawned Cecil, with the coils of his hookah bubbling among the rosewater. The man I'm afraid of is that fellow from the 10th. He's as light as a feather and hard as steel. I watched him yesterday going over the water, and the horse he'll ride for Trelawney is good enough to beat even if the king is properly piloted. You haven't kept yourself in condition, Beauty, growled Tom with the chibuka in his mouth. Else nothing could give you the go-by. It's tempting Providence to go in for the gilt vase after such a December and January as you spent in Paris. Even the week you've been in the Shires, you haven't trained a bit. You've been waltzing or playing baccarat till 5 in the morning and taking no end of sodas after to bring you right for the meet at 9. If a man will drink champagne and burgundies as you do and spend his time after women, I should like to know how he's to be in hard-riding condition unless he expects a miracle. With which Chesterfield, who weighed 14 stone himself and was, therefore, out of all but welter races and wanted a weight carrier of tremendous power even for them, subsided under a heap of velvet and cashmere. And Cecil laughed, lying on a divan just under one of the gas branches. The light fell full on his handsome face with its fair hue and its gentle languor on which there was not a single trace of the Utrecht dance attributed to him. Both he and the seraph could lead the wildest life of any men in Europe without looking one shadow more worn than the brightest beauty of the season, and could hold wassail in riotous rivalry till the sun rose, and then throw themselves into saddle as fresh as if they had been sound asleep all night, to keep up with the pack the whole day in a fast burst or in a cold scent, or in whatever sport fortune and the coverts gave them, till their second horses wound their way homeward through muddy, leafless lanes when the stars had risen. Beauty doesn't believe in training. No more do I. Never would train for anything, said the seraph now, pulling the long blonde moustaches that were not altogether in character with his seraphic cognomen. If a man can ride, let him. If he's born to the pigskin, he'll be in it at the distance safe enough, whether he smokes or don't smoke, drink or don't drink. As for training on raw chops, giving up wine, living like the very deuce and all, as if you were in a monastery and changing yourself into a mere bag of bones, it's utter bosh. You might as well be in purgatory. Besides, it's no more credit to win then than if you were a trained professional. But you must have trained at Christchurch, Rock for the 8, asked another guardsman, Sir Vere Bellingham. Severe as he was christened, chiefly for he was the easiest going giant in existence. Did I? Men came to me, wanted me to join the 8. Coxswain came. Awful strict little fellow, docked his men all of their fun. Took plenty himself, though. Coxswain said I must begin to train, do as all his crew did. I threw up my sleeve and showed him my arm, and the seraph stretched out an arm magnificent enough for a statue of Marlowe. I said, there, sir, I'll help you thrash Cambridge if you like, but train I won't for you or all the university. I've been captain of the Eton 8, but I didn't keep my crew on tea and toast. I fattened them regularly 3 times a week on venison and champagne at Christopher's. Very happy to feed yours too, if you like. Game comes down to me every Friday from the Duke's moors. They look uncommonly as if they wanted it. You should have seen his face. Fatten the 8? He didn't let me do that, of course. But he was very glad of my oar in his rowlocks, and I helped him beat Cambridge without training an hour myself, except so far as rowing hard went. And the Marquis of Rockingham, made thirsty by the recollection, dipped his fair moustache into a foaming seltzer. Quite right, seraph, said Cecil. When a man comes up to the weights looking like a homunculus after he's been getting every atom of flesh off him like a jockey, he ought to be struck out for all the stakes, to my mind. It isn't a question of riding, then, nor yet of pluck or of management. It's nothing but a question of pounds and of who can stand the tamest life the longest. Well, beneficial for one's morals at any rate, suggested Sir Vere. Morals be hanged, said Bertie, very immorally. I'm glad you remind us of them, Vere. You're such a quintessence of decorum and respectability yourself. I say, anybody know anything of this fellow of the 10th that's to ride Trelawney's chestnut? Jimmy Delmar. Oh yes, I know Jimmy, answered Lord Cosmo of Wentworth, of the Scots Fusiliers and from the far depths of an armchair. Knew him in Aldershot. Fine rider. Give you a good bit of trouble, beauty. Hasn't been in England for years. Trip been such a while at Calcutta. The fancy you take to him, rather, offering very freely on him this morning in the village. And he's got a rare good thing in that chestnut. Not a doubt of it. The white lily blood out of that Irish mare Doloyan's diamonds, too. Never mind. 10th won't beat us. The household will win safe enough unless Forest King goes and breaks his back over Brixworth. Beauty, said the seraph, who believed devoutly in his comrade, with all the loving loyalty characteristic of the House of Lyonnaise, that to monarchs and to friends had often costed very dear. You put your faith in the wrong quarter, Rock. I may fail you. He never will, said Cecil, with ever so slightly a dash of sadness in his words. The thought crossed him of how boldly, how straightly, how gallantly the horse always breasted and conquered his difficulties. Did he himself deal with half so well as his own? Well, you both carry all our money and all our credit, so for the fair fame of the household, do all you know. I haven't hedged a shilling, nor laid off a farthing, Bertie. I stand on you and the king and nothing else. See what a sublime faith I have in you. I don't think you're wise then, seraph. The field will be very strong, said Cecil languidly. The answer was indifferent, and certainly thankless, but under his drooped lids a glance, frank and warm, rested for the moment on Seraph's leonine strength and the Raphaelesque head. It was not his way to say it, or to show it, or even to much think it, but in his heart he loved his old friend wonderfully well. And then they talked on of little else than the great steeplechase of the service. For the next hour in the Tabak Parliament, while the great clouds of scented smoke circled heavily round, making a halo of Turkish above the gold locks of the Titanic seraph, steeping Chesterfield's velvets in strong odours of Cavendish, and lighting a light rose-scented mist over Bertie's long, lithe limbs, light enough and skilled enough to disdain all training for the weights. That's not the way to be in condition, growled Tom, getting up with a great shake as the clock clanged the strokes of 5. They had only returned from a ball 3 miles off when Cecil paid his visit to his loose box. Bertie laughed. His laugh was like himself, rather languid but very light-hearted, very silvery, very engaging. Sit and smoke till breakfast time if you like, Tom. It won't make any difference to me. But the smoke parliament wouldn't hear of the champion of the household over the ridge and furrow risking the steadiness of his wrist and the keenness of his eye, but any such additional tempting of Providence, and went off itself in various directions with good-night iced drinks, yawning considerably like most other parliaments after a sitting. It was the old family place of the Royal House in which he had congregated half the guardsmen in the service for the great event, and consequently the bachelor chambers in it were of the utmost comfort and spaciousness. And when Cecil sauntered into his old quarters, familiar from boyhood, he could not have been better off in his own luxurious haunts in Piccadilly. Moreover, the first thing that caught his eye was a dainty scarlet silk riding jacket, broidered in gold and silver with the motto of his house, Que Valiant Cephage Royaume, all circled with oak and laurel leaves on the collar. It was the work of very fair hands, very aristocratic hands, and he looked at it with a smile. Ah, my lady, he thought half aloud, do you really love me? Do I really love you? There was a laugh in his eye as he asked himself what might be termed an interesting question. Then something more earnest came over his face, and he stood a second with his pretty, costly embroideries in his hand, with a smile that was almost tender, though it was still much more amused. I suppose we do, he concluded at last, at least quite as much as it ever worthwhile. Passions don't do for the drawing room, as somebody says in Coningsby. Besides, I would not feel a strong emotion for the universe. Bad style always, and more detrimental to condition, as Tom would say, than 3 bottles of brandy. He was so little near what he dreaded, at present at least, that the scarlet jacket was tossed down again and gave him no dreams of his fair entitled embroideress. He looked out, the last thing, at some ominous clouds drifting heavily up before the dawn, and the state of the weather and the chance of it being rainy filled his thoughts to the utter exclusion of the donor of that bright, golden-laden, dainty gift. I hope to goodness there won't be any drenching shower. Forest King can stand ground as hard as a slate, but if there's one thing he's weak in, it's slush, was Bertie's last conscious thought as he stretched out his limbs and fell sound asleep. Chapter 3. The Soldier's Blue Ribbon. Take the field, bar 1, 2-1 on Forest King, 2-1 on Bay Regent, 14-7 on Wild Geranium, 7-2 against Brother to Fairy, 3-5 on Pas de Charge, 19-6 on Day Star. Take the field, bar 1, rose above the hoarse, tumultuous roar of the ring on the crisp, clear, sunny morning that was shining on the shires on the day of the famous steeplechase. The talent had come in great muster from London. The great bookmakers were there with their stento lungs and their quiet, quick entry of thousands, and the din and the turmoil at the tip-top of their heart was more like a gathering on the heath or before the Red House than the local throngs that usually mark steeplechase meetings, even when they be the Grand Military or the Grand National. There were keen excitement and heavy stakes on the present evening. The betting had never stood still a second in town or the shires, and even the knowing ones, the worshippers of the flat alone, the professionals who ran down gentlemen racers and hypercritics who affirmed that there was not such a thing as a steeplechaser to be found on earth, since to be a fencer, a water jumper, and a racer were to attain an equine perfection impossible on earth, whatever that may be, an happy hunting ground of immortality. Even these, one and all of them, came eager to see the running for the gilt vase. It was known very well that the Guards had backed their horse tremendously, and the county laid most of its money on him, and the bookmakers were shy of laying off much against one of the first cross-country riders of the service, who had landed his mount on the Grand National Handicap, the Billisden Coplo, the Ealing, the Curragh, and the Prix de Dijon, and the Restat, and almost every other for which he had entered. Yet despite this, the fancy took most to Bay Regent. They thought he would cut his work out. His sire had won the Champion Stakes at Doncaster and the Drawing Room at glorious Goodwood, and that racing strain through the White Lady blood, coupled with a magnificent reputation which he brought from Leicestershire as a fencer, found him chief favour among the fraternity. His jockey, Jimmy Delmar too, with his bronzed, muscular, sinewy frame, his low stature, his light weight, his sunburnt, acute face, and a way of carrying his hands as he rode that was precisely like Eldcroft's, looked 100 times more professional than the brilliance of beauty and the reckless dash of his well-known way of sending the horse along with all he had in him, which was undeniably much more like a fast kill of the Melton country, like a wait-for-age race anyway. "You see the service in his stirrups," said an old nobbler who had watched many a trial spin, "lying hidden in a ditch or a drain, and indisputably you did. Bertie's riding was superb, but it was still the riding of a cavalryman, not of a jockey. The mere turn of the foot in the stirrups told it, as the old man had the shrewdness to know." So the king went down at 1 time and 2 points in the morning betting. "Know them flash cracks of the household," said Tim Varnett, as sharp as little leg ever got on a dark thing and went halves with a jock who consented to rope a favourite to the ducal. "Them swells, you see, they give any money for blood. They just go by Godolphin heads and little feet and winner's strains and all the rest of it, and so long as they get pedigree, never look at substance, and their bone comes no bigger than a deer's. Now it's force as well as pace that tells over a bit of a plough. A critter that would win the Derby on the flat would knock up over the first spin over the clods, and that king's legs are too light for my fancy, handsome as 'tis undeniably looks, for a little one, as the one may say. and Tim Varnett expressed exactly the dominant mistrust of the talent. Despite all his races and all his exploits, the king was not popular in the ring, because he was like his backers, a swell. They looked at him, showy, very showy, a picture to frame, a lust to look at, but they disbelieved in him almost to a man as a stayer, and they trusted him scarcely at all with their money. "'Tis plain that he's meant, though," thought little Tim, who was so used to the shady and stable manners, they could hardly persuade himself that even the grand military could be run fair, and would have thought a guardsman or a hussar only exercised his just privilege as a jockey in roping after selling the race, if so it suited his book. He's meant, that's clear, because the swells have put all their pots on him. But if the pots don't boil over, strike me a loser. A contingency he knew he might very well invoke, his investments being invariably so matchlessly arranged that let what would be bowled over, Tim Varnett never could be. Whatever the king might prove, however, the guards, the flower of the service, must stand or fall by him. They had not seraph. They put in beauty and his grey, but there was no doubt as to the tremendousness of the struggle lying before him. The running ground covered 4 miles and a half and had 42 jumps in it, exclusive of the famous Brickworth. Half was grassland and half ridge and furrow, a lane with very awkward double fences laced in and out with the memorable blackthorn, a laid hedge with thick growers in it, and many other teaser, coupled with the yawning water, made the course a severe one, while 32 starters of unusual excellence gave a good field and a promise of a close race. Every fine bit of steeplechase blood that was to be found in the studs, the service had brought together for the great event. And if the question could ever be solved whether it was possible to find a strain that shall combine pace over the flat with the heart to stay in over enclosed country, the speed to race to the bottom of the fences and the force to clear water, it seemed likely to be settled now. The service and the stable had done their utmost to reach this position. The clock of the course pointed to 1:30. The saddling bell would ring at 1:45, for the days were short and darkened early. The stewards were all arrived, except the Marquis of Rockingham, and the king was in the full rush of excitement, some getting on hurriedly to make up for lost time, some peppering one or the other of the favourites hotly, some laying off their moneys in a cold fit of caution, some putting capfuls on the king or bay regent or pasticharge from the great commission stables, the local betting men, the shrewd wiseacres from the ridings. All the rest of the brotherhood of the turf were crowding together with the deafening shouting common to them which sounds so tumultuous, so insane and so unintelligible to outsiders. Among them half the titled heads of England and all the great names known on the flat, and men in the guards, men in the rifles, men in the light cavalry, men in the heavies, men in the Scots Greys, men in the house artillery, men in all the arms and all the regiments that had sent their first riders to try for the blue ribbon, were backing their horses with crackers and jotting down figure after figure with jeweled pencils and dating books, taking long odds with the fields. Carriages were standing in long lines along the course. The stands were filled with almost as bright a bevy as fashionable loveliness as the ducal brings together under the park trees of Goodwood. The horses were being led into the enclosures for saddling. A brilliant sun shone for the nonce on the freshest of February noons. Beautiful women were fluttering out of their barouches in furs and velvets, wearing the colours of the jockey they favoured, and more predominant than any was Cecil's scarlet and white, only rivalled in prominence by the azure of the heavy cavalry champion, Sir Eyre Montacute, a drag with 4 bays, with fine hunting points above them, had dashed up late, of course. The seraph had swung himself from the roller bolts into the saddle of his hack, one of those few rare hacks that are perfect and combine every excellence of pace, bone, and action under their modest appellative, and had cantered off to join the stewards, while Cecil had gone up to a group of ladies in the grandstand as if he had no more to do with the morning's business than they. Right in front of that stand was an artificial bullfinch that promised to treat most of the field to a perla, a deep ditch dug and filled with water, with 2 towering blackthorn fences on either side of it, as awkward a leap as the most cramped country ever showed. Some were complaining of it. It was too severe. It was unfair. It would break the back of every horse sent at it. The other stewards were not unwilling to have it tamed down a little, but he, Seraph, generally the easiest of all sweet-tempered creatures, refused resolutely to let it be touched. "Look here," he said confidentially, as he wheeled his hack round to the stand and beckoned Cecil down. "Look here, Beauty. They're wanting to alter that teaser, make it less awkward, you know? But I wouldn't, because I thought it would look as if I had listened it for you, you know. Still, it is a cracker and no mistake. Brixworth itself is nothing to it, and if you'd like it toned down, I'll let them do it." "My Seraph, not for worlds. You are quite right not to have a thorn taken down." "Why, that's where I shall thrash Bay Region," said Bertie serenely, as if the winning of the stakes had been forecast in his horoscope. The Seraph whistled, stroking his moustaches. "Between ourselves, Cecil, that fellow is going up no end. The talent fancy him so." "Let them," said Cecil placidly, with a great cheroot in his mouth, lounging into the centre of the ring to hear how the betting went on in his own mount, perfectly regardless that he would keep him waiting at the weights while he dressed. Everybody there knew him by name and sight, and eager glances followed the tall form of the Guards champion as he moved through the press, in a loose brown sealskin coat with a little strip of scarlet ribbon around his throat, nodding to his peer, taking evens with that, exchanging a whisper with the Duke and squaring his book with the Jew. Murmurs followed him about as if he were the horse himself. "Looks in racing form, looks used up to me. Too little hands surely to hold too long in a spin. Too much length in the limbs for a light weight. Bones awfully heavy. Dark under the eye, been going too fast for training. A swell all over, but rides no end." With other innumerable contradictory phrases, according as if the speaker was on him or against him, buzzed about him from the riffraff of the ring, in no way disturbing his serene equanimity. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepytime Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in the new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Un Deseo by Kumiko. Check out more of their work on their website, which you will find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.